This whole week has been dope with all the PineCreek in my life. Well, thank you, Heathen Running Girl 1985. It's been a fun week. Last time I forgot to give out Pine Points, so I better do it right away. Leventon Genser, 1,000 Pine Points to you. New name, welcome if you're new. Felix Graphics, wonder what's going on, what this is going to be about. Yeah, it's a good question, Felix. 500 Pine Points for you. Bob Smith, darn it, he says. No, don't say darn it. You got 250 Pine Points. So my friend Science Pete's going to be here in a second if he doesn't stand me up. And if he does stand me up, that's fine too, because we'll just talk. You guys can ask me questions, or you guys can even come on live stream. I can open it up to atheists this time. You know how I always say only theists or Christians call in. I might open it up to atheists if my friend Pete doesn't show up. But I think he will, because he's passionate about this stuff and he wants to do this. So am I. How do you get Pine Points? You have to be here first 3 on the live streams, in the live stream chat, or you have to make me laugh, or you have to say something really intelligent, really witty, really pithy, really good. Oh, Pete's here. Okay. Hey Pete, let me. We're live, so don't say anything bad. Okay. But you can talk.
Oh, can they hear me?
Yeah, they can hear you. And right now they can see you. Okay. So we wanted to talk about vaccinations. First of all, how are you doing, Pete?
Doing okay.
Why don't you tell people what you do for a living and introduce yourself a little bit?
I am an infectious disease scientist. I've been working in this field for, I think, over 15 years now.
For the Chinese government, or?
No. I currently work in the biopharmaceutical industry, but I've started my career spent most of my career in academia, now in the private sector. I have a PhD in molecular genetics and microbiology, and am pretty familiar with a lot of the work that's been going on around COVID. I haven't personally been working on COVID, but I am familiar with some of the efforts.
And it's your company that saved Trump's life, right?
Or
you can't answer that. Okay, strike that from the record. Sorry, I should have said that. What was I going to ask?
Oh, but you're to be here, Doug.
Oh, you quit that job, right? But your real claim to fame is you know, or have at least talked to Alan Alda. And for the kids out there, he was a famous TV star in the 70s and 80s. When did MASH end? Was it the 80s?
In the 80s, and he was on shows into the. I think he was on. Was he on the West Wing? I think at one point.
Oh yeah.
He was on Horace and Pete. That show, there was I think it was an online show. He's constantly doing stuff. He was in the movie recently with what's her name? Scarlett Johansson, and the guy who plays in the Star Wars movies. Who's the guy who's like the Darth Vader-ish character. I keep forgetting his name. The new Darth Vader type guy.
Oh, yeah, I know who you mean. Ray, not Ray. The Ray's an opposite. What's his name? Someone I've seen channel.
Yes. Anyways, so there was a movie with Scarlett Johansson and him about divorce, and Alan Alda played a divorce lawyer in that movie recently. That was up for like an Oscar too.
He must be. He's really, really old by now, right?
He's in his 80s, and he recently, I don't know, maybe within the past year or two, announced that he has Parkinson's disease. So,
oh man,
yeah.
And your other claim to fame is your second claim to fame is you know, or at least talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I don't know Neil deGrasse Tyson. I did spend a full day with him, had dinner with him, got to introduce him on stage. So I spent a solid couple hours with
Didn't
Neil
you two
deGrasse
go out
Tyson.
for massages or something?
That wasn't supposed to be public, but it was pedicures. But
Oh yeah, pedicures. Yeah. And your third claim to fame is you know me.
if we want to call that a claim to fame, or is it your claim to fame that you know me?
Well, we're both YouTubers now.
Well, I've given up that career now. So
Seriously?
it just the terms, the reuse regulations that YouTube has now implemented just sort of make it impossible for the channel that I was trying to make to go anywhere.
So did you actually delete your channel?
I didn't delete it. It's still there. I mean, people can go look at it.
What's it called?
Absolute Calm. It's just like calming music to just soothe your mind during a hectic, stressful period like a pandemic.
So if you want to see, if you're a Christian listening, we're two opposites. If you want your anxieties up, you listen to me, watch me. And if you want your anxieties to go down, you go to Pete's channel, Absolute Calm. And
they're still up there. So
okay.
If people like it, I'll keep making stuff. But I kind of stopped. It stopped getting views. So, but check it out.
I was reading the other day, where I forget where it was, but it gave pointers that if you wanted to have a good reason not to get vaccinated, this is what you should say. And one of them was to ask the doctor about if there's any fetal tissue in the vaccine. And if there is, then you can say, well, that's against my religion or whatever. And the other one was, I forget what the other one was. Oh, yeah, some type of allergic reaction. And you're supposed to pick just any allergy and say it to your doctor and say you're concerned it's going to influence that one. And it was really bizarre to me how there's people on the internet now trying to figure out crafty ways to, because they just don't want to say, oh no, I don't want to take the vaccine. Well, why not? Well, because it has a chip in it or something, or I don't want the government elite to know. And so they're trying to come up with crafty ways to say, so that people don't shame them, I guess. Have you heard anything or read anything about that?
I haven't. I mean, I know that there is vaccine skepticism. There always has been, and definitely surrounding this, which I do not think is warranted. But there are, and I got to put this out there, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a scientist, so I can't give medical advice. And I would always encourage people to check the CDC website, because a lot of this information, as far as who would be most eligible for the vaccine, and who should and who shouldn't, and there are situations where a person might be advised not to take the vaccine. All that information is there. There is instances where people are hyperallergenic to, have allergies to a lot of different things, and situations like that where a person does have a lot of allergies, they may require additional consultation to see if they would be eligible for the vaccine. And I think there might be, not for concern of negative effects, but maybe women who may be pregnant, just because there isn't a lot of data surrounding pregnant women getting the vaccine. There were people in the clinical trials, I believed, who got the vaccine, and while they were on it, did get pregnant. But I think there's some questions in there that would be appropriate to consult with a physician just to make sure that you still meet the eligibility criteria to get it.
How exactly does a vaccine work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So before you learn about how a vaccine works, we need to understand how the immune system works. And I want to say that immunology is a pretty complex field. And I'm not saying, I'm not prefacing this to say that I'm going to throw you a lot of information and just, and it's going to go right over your head.
Pete, for those of you who know me, Pete knows me even better. And so he knows not to bloviate too much.
Yeah, exactly. but it is a pretty complex field, even for people who study immunology. And I currently work in an immunology field, since infectious disease is sort of intimately intertwined with immunology. But essentially, your immune system, as most of us know, is our body's way of protecting us from foreign invaders, whether it be bacteria or viruses. And when the viruses come into your body, the immune system recognizes these foreign invaders, or things that are considered non-self, or so something that is not produced by your own body. So, like, something other than your own tissues, your own cells. And what happens is the body recognizes this. It has sensors to sort of recognize foreign material, foreign invaders. And what it does is it tells the immune system that, okay, we need to mount a response against this thing. And many times there are different ways that it can mount a response, but one of the key ways is through mounting what's called an antibody, or a humoral response is the scientific term for it. And essentially what this is that the body starts producing these proteins called antibodies. And antibodies are essentially like keys. And we know that keys come in different shapes, and that certain keys are specific for certain locks. And these antibody proteins, they are produced by the body in a way in which they evolve a certain shape, which is specific to that virus or pathogen. So it can essentially lock onto it with great specificity, like a key would fit with specificity into a lock. And your body goes through this process of selecting the best antibodies, so the best keys to fit that lock. And it takes about 2 weeks for your body to go through this refinement process of identifying those antibodies. Once those antibodies are produced, or selected for by your immune system and produced, it produces them in mass quantity. It can bind the virus or that lock. It can then neutralize it, so essentially just blocking things on the virus that prevent it from entering into your cells. It can also do things like flag the virus so that other cells of the immune system can come in and gobble it up and clear it away. So those keys, those antibodies, can work have multiple functions. The other key part of this is that when the immune system or these antibodies clear that virus or bacteria away, the cells in your body that made those keys, those antibodies, actually go into sort of a dormant state in what we call memory. And what this means is that those cells are ready. They're sort of dormant is in your immune system. And when you get re-exposed to that virus again, it already knows, hey, I got the cell that already has that magic key that can tackle that virus. So it doesn't have to go through this whole process of building up all these new antibodies again, because it's already stored that memory in its cells, and those cells just wake up and can start producing antibody immediately. So now you would have immediate protection to that pathogen. Okay. So that's how the immune system works. So and that will lead into vaccination. But you had a question.
No. You go. Okay, you're on a roll here. Go to the vaccination now.
Okay, so a vaccine. What a vaccine is essentially a piece of the pathogen. So it's not an infectious particle. It's not the pathogen or the live virulent, or the part of the pathogen that can actually cause disease. It's either a piece of it. So in the case of the coronavirus, we hear about this spike protein. It's this protein that's on the surface that the virus uses to attach to your cells, or it could be a form of the virus that has been inactivated. Either it's been treated with certain chemicals or UV light to damage its DNA, so that the shell of the virus or the bacteria is there, but it's not infectious. It doesn't have the ability to enter your cells and replicate and all that stuff. And a vaccine would contain that component, so the component of the pathogen, and it would contain a second component, which is called an adjuvant. And what an adjuvant is essentially sort of like a molecule that sort of alerts the immune system that something is going on here. So in a typical infection, you don't need an adjuvant, because the pathogen itself, as it infects your cells and things like that, it creates alarm signals that something bad is going on here. But if I just injected that virus, that virus piece, that single protein on the virus or the dead virus, it's not going to do much to stimulate an immune response against it. You need something else to sort of fire up the immune system, be like, hey, I got something here for you that you should check out, and you should start making a response to it. And those chemicals are called adjuvants that are commonly used in many vaccines. So they're formulated with the piece of the virus or the bacteria together, and then you get the injection. You get a local immune response in which your body starts producing these antibodies. And then you may require sort of what's called booster shots throughout a couple of weeks after. So you'll get the initial dose, which is called the prime. You'll mount an immune response to that. And a couple of weeks later, you may get a second dose just to give another wallop to the immune system to say, you know what, no, I want you to keep making some more antibodies to this, to really refine that key making process, to really get the best
And then will that
possible.
last for the rest of your life?
It depends on the infectious agent. So some vaccines, it does last the rest of your life. So things like the measles vaccine, you only got to get it once and you have protection for the rest of your life. The polio vaccine. There are some vaccines, and we're not entirely sure why this is the case. It could be the nature of the pathogen or the piece of the pathogen that you're giving in the vaccine, in which sometimes you do need multiple boosts throughout your life. A good example is like the tetanus vaccine. You usually need to get one about every 10 years or so. So it's not necessarily a dose that's just given once or twice and then you're protected for life in all cases. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. There was one other thing. The flu. Another thing to keep in mind is that these pathogens mutate and they change. And the flu virus is well known for this. The flu virus has multiple different strains. It's constantly mutating. So you have to get a flu vaccine every year, which has different strains or predicted strains for that upcoming flu season. Because if you got last year's vaccine, you likely don't have the protection because the strains have mutated or shifted to different strains that your body wouldn't have full protection against. So you also have to keep up with the evolution of these pathogens as well when you're thinking about vaccinations.
Do you know the status of the evolution of COVID right now? Like, how many strains do we have right now? So we would need a vaccine for each strain, yes?
Yes and no. So it depends on where the mutations are occurring. So if the mutations are occurring on areas that you're directing the immune response to, for instance, this spike protein, if you're having a mutation, lots of different mutations in a particular region of that is important for the function of that protein, there is potential that you may need new vaccines for that. But also what happens when you get a vaccination, you produce actually many keys or many antibodies to that target. So if out of that repertoire of antibodies that you're producing, maybe due to a little bit of mutation, one of those antibodies no longer works, your body has made backups that could also work on it. So it would typically, we hope it would provide some broad protection. We know that the coronavirus doesn't mutate to the level that the flu virus does, because the flu virus has a different way in which it organizes its genome. But there is potential, especially as the strain continues to circulate through the population, that the mutations may cause it to diverge enough where that we may need sort of seasonal vaccinations in the future. So we just don't know yet, though.
Okay, the questions are starting to pour in, so I had a few of my own, but I don't want to lose them here, so I'm going to switch to there. Doorknob Head asks, what does Pete think of Randy Thornhill's parasite, stress, sociality, values, personality, and do you know what he's talking about? Randy Thornhill? Okay, I didn't think so.
No.
Sorry, Doorknob Head. Kent Setsma. Will this be a vaccine that we'll have to take every year like the flu? You already answered that. You take it once, then a booster, and maybe twice, depending on which company makes it.
So right now, we didn't go into this, but there's different types of vaccines. The vaccines that are being administered now by Pfizer and Moderna are called mRNA vaccines, which are a different platform of vaccine than I was just discussing with you. What I was telling you was sort of like the traditional sense of vaccines. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are different in the sense that you're not actually given a piece of the virus or a piece of the protein or the inactivated virus itself. You're actually injected with mRNA, which essentially is genetic software that tells your cells to produce this spike protein.
Wait a minute. This sounds like God's doing. Like, you're saying that these vaccines will have this RNA, which is like half of DNA, which is going to fuse with your DNA, and then you're going to end up
No.
becoming a monster?
No. So first of all, RNA does not fuse with your DNA, so you don't have to worry about that happening. That's one reason why they use RNA in these, because of that safety feature, and that RNA does not integrate into DNA. But essentially, RNA. So if we take a step back and we think a little bit about molecular genetics, DNA is essentially the program of life, the software of life. It essentially tells cells how to make all the proteins that are needed to conduct the chemistry of life. And in order to go from DNA to a protein, you have an intermediary, which is called messenger RNA. So messenger RNA is synthesized by copying the DNA, and then that messenger RNA is the template from which the proteins are made. So, here you go. So on the left here, you would have the DNA double helix. On the right, you would have essentially a form or a copy of that DNA or a portion of that DNA called RNA. And the RNA that encodes proteins is called messenger RNA or mRNA. So what we can do is we can synthetically make this messenger RNA in the lab, and we can encode with it the code to make the protein for it to build the spike protein, or that portion of the coronavirus that we know that we want the immune response directed to. So you essentially take this messenger RNA, you package it into these lipid particles, essentially like little fat particles, and you inject it into your muscle. And the RNA goes into your cells. And since your cells use RNA all the time to make their own proteins, they see this RNA and they start producing the spike protein from the coronavirus. Now, they're not producing the other components of the coronavirus. It's not infecting you or anything like that, but they are producing that spike protein. And since that spike protein is a foreign protein, your body doesn't normally see the spike protein, it activates the immune response to start producing those antibodies.
How do they actually get the RNA? Do they just have someone cough into a petri dish who has COVID, and then you take a really fine knife and you just do you know how they do it?
So we first get the DNA of the virus. Coronaviruses are RNA viruses to begin with. So actually, the way the coronavirus works is that it binds to your cells through the spike protein, and it fuses with with the cell membrane, and it releases its genetic material into the cell. And the genetic material that it has actually is RNA.
Okay.
But we don't actually take the RNA from the virus and then repurpose it and put it into the vaccine. What you do in the lab is you sequence the virus.
You build it.
So we build it essentially. So you sequence, you computationally figure out the virus genome, the virus DNA sequence, and then from there we have procedures in which we can artificially synthesize RNA from that DNA, and then that RNA would be used.
So basically, the heroes here are the biochemists.
Yeah, biochemists, the bioinformaticists who are studying the sequences and stuff like that too.
I used to laugh at biochemistry because it's just a bunch of memorization, but no, they actually do some good in the world.
Yeah.
Highways and Byways asks, are the vaccines safe for people taking biologic immunosuppressants?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is something that you would want to bring up with a physician. But in most cases, it's probably going to be just fine that you take the vaccine. There are some biologic immunosuppressants that actually suppress antibody production. So that is one situation where you definitely want to talk with the doctor, because if you're there are certain diseases in which lupus is an example of this, in which your body makes antibodies that are not helpful to you. And in fact, in lupus, you actually make antibodies to your own DNA, which is very bad. And there are drugs to help sort of tamp down the antibody production. So in a situation like that, having a vaccine it may not be as efficacious. So you definitely want to consult with a doctor, depending on which biologic you're taking.
Bob Smith has a question here, but I'll say it as written, but if there's a mother listening right now and she's scared to put a vaccine into one of her children, do we know the odds of something horribly wrong, what the odds are that their child would die from getting the vaccine?
So there have been no reported, as far as I know, there have been no reported deaths from the vaccine. So I don't think that has ever been a concern. During the clinical trial phase of this, it did clear, all these safety milestones for this. There have been a few, and again, I want to highlight a few, not many at all. It is extremely rare at this point to instances where an individual had an allergic reaction to it. But again, it's very uncommon given the numbers of people getting these vaccines. And all vaccines can have, again, in a very small numbers of the population, very, very small numbers of the population, may have some slight side effects. But these side effects are not on a scale that should deter anyone from getting the vaccine. They happen in really rare situations, and you're also going to a medical facility to get these. So you're going to be monitored once you're getting them too. So if for some reason there was an allergic reaction, you would have a nurse or physician present to administer Benadryl or an EpiPen or something like that too. So
do we know the percentage of people who get very extreme allergic reactions?
So I don't know them off the top of my head. I want to say, I know that there was like 2 reported cases in the UK. I know of 1 in the US. But again, and we've given out over like 2.7 million doses so far. So the odds are very small.
The odds are in your favor, as the Hunger Games say.
Exactly. Yeah, the odds are very in your favor. But it is, if you are a person who does have significant allergies, it is something that you want to report to your physician and have that conversation with them.
Do you know anything about, I'll read Bob Smith's comment. I have a family member with lupus. Do you know of any studies regarding that and the vaccines? Any problems? Any sites to look up post-vaccine side effects or warnings?
Yeah, so I also want to mention, I'll come back to the lupus part, but some side effects common side effects that have been reported, and these are common to vaccines. So it's not unique to these vaccines. These are, I get the flu shot every year, in which from the shot you can feel soreness or tenderness in the arm, and either after the first or the second dose, you may have a period for a couple hours where you may feel feverish and have some body aches, but these are very transient, and within a day or 2, they should resolve just fine. I want to make this very clear, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't get the flu vaccine because the flu vaccine gives you the flu, because they feel these small side effects and they're like, oh my God, I had the flu. You did not have the flu. You do not get the flu from the flu vaccine. You're not going to get coronavirus from the coronavirus vaccine. The reason someone may have some of those side effects, those minor side effects, you may get a slight fever or something, is because it's the immune response working. It's working against producing an immune response to that target protein. So if you do have those side effects, you should rest assured that it means that your immune system is in full effect, and it is making an appropriate response to that spike protein, so that if you do see the virus in the future, your immune system is ready to go to clear it. Now, we mentioned, I don't know of any specific studies per se with lupus, but I will highlight again, there may be drugs that people are taking, immunosuppressive drugs. I mentioned some drugs that hinder the ability of the immune system to produce antibodies. And these, in those types of situations, especially for someone with lupus who has an autoimmune disease, definitely consult with your physician as far as your eligibility. But this also brings up another topic, in that not everyone is eligible to get a vaccine, which makes it that much more important for those of us who are eligible to get the vaccine to get it, because that helps us build herd immunity amongst the population, and that herd immunity protects those individuals that aren't eligible to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I heard Canadians are not eligible.
That's going to be a problem, I guess. So you're doing a service to those individuals who, for some reason, they have a weak immune system, or they have some other secondary condition that prevents them from getting vaccines, because there are people out there that have conditions that exclude them. you're protecting them by getting yourself and your community vaccinated. So that's really, really important for them, because they would actually be way more susceptible to the disease if they got it.
Here's my question: if someone has COVID and can get it again, why can't someone get a vaccine and get COVID?
Say that one more time.
So someone has COVID and they get rid of it. Their immune system shut it down and they're cleared. But then they get COVID again. There's been reports of people getting COVID a second time, right?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
So if that can happen, if the virus can do that, why can't what's to stop someone getting vaccinated and still getting COVID?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the context of the infection, we know that there are individuals who are very good at mounting an immune response to the infection naturally when they get it, and there are individuals who don't. The individuals who don't mount a very good immune response are the ones that usually end up going into the hospital and having the more severe effects, and then many of them will recover, but many of them are also dying. So in the context of a natural infection, you have differences in the population as far as the robustness of their immune response to tackle the infection, and also you're generating an immune response to all the parts of the virus. So not just the parts of the virus that are essential to infecting your cells, but other parts of the virus that aren't essential to infecting your cells. Where a vaccine differs is that the immune response is focused. It's focused and it's almost hyperactivated in a sense, in a more controlled manner, where that immune response is focused directly to that spike protein, which is the key protein to allowing the virus enter your cells. So you can say with confidence that the majority of the antibodies that are going to be circulating through your blood are going to hit that Achilles heel. Where in the context of the natural infection, you have a much broader repertoire of antibodies that are hitting different parts of the virus, some that may be important for infection, but others that may not be. So you're just sort of like you're focusing your energy towards the important parts of the virus.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's sort of like what I do. Like when I'm talking to someone face to face on my live stream, it's very focused, and there's no, I vaccinate them from the God virus. Did I say that? But when people are just listening to me, the general, just one ear listening to a live stream, it's just the general broadband.
It wasn't as bad as your story about Myron's wife.
Oh, you heard that, did you? Oh, I can't believe I swore for $148, but I did.
Well, you've been known to sell your soul to the devil in the past. So
it's my former life as a dancer. It's like raining money. Catherine, who I actually interviewed the other day, asks, the death rate for COVID is so low. Is it worth the vaccination side effects?
Okay. So the death rate for COVID COVID right now is the leading, I think it's now the leading cause of death in the United States. So that is not a low rate of death. I mean, you can always have higher rates of death, but relatively speaking, this is not a low rate of death. It is a much higher, about 10-fold higher death rate than the flu virus. So everything has got to be taken relatively. So just because you might know a bunch of people who got it and didn't die from it, doesn't mean that there is a high death rate. The death rate is higher amongst certain populations of the certain individuals in the population. So we know that the elderly, those with secondary conditions.
Catherine told me publicly that she's 39, so she doesn't need to worry, does she?
Selfish millennial like myself. But the death rate in those populations is significantly higher than 20-year-olds. Okay, so we also have to contextualize it amongst different age groups as well. The other thing too is it's where things get really bad, and I think this is even worse than the death rate, is the hospitalization rate. I think it's around 20% of people who get infected end up in the hospital. And we are in a medical, a healthcare crisis right now, because you have places like California, Los Angeles, where my sister lives, where there are no ICU beds available. And when you have a hospital system that's overrun with sick patients, you now start depleting the amount of staff that's available to take care of these people, resources, beds, and it puts at risk people who are acquiring other symptoms, diseases. So the person who has the heart attack has a greater chance of dying now because there's no bed available for them at the hospital to go get defibrillated and get their heart started up again. So, so it's not necessarily always the death rate that's the worst part of it. It's the hospitalization rate, because the hospitalization rate is what consumes resources that has so many downstream effects.
Yeah, even if nobody died from COVID, like hands up, who here wants to get sick? Who wants to lose their, I guess I was going to ask who wants to lose their sense of taste, but if you're overweight, maybe that's beneficial, but.
I've seen some of your outfits. So I don't know if you ever had it.
JD asks, why are you so dreamy?
Oh, well, gotta ask my parents that question.
Yeah. Robert, I asked people in the live stream chat to give reasons why not to take the vaccine. So I'm not sure if this is what they truly believe or they're just playing devil's advocate. But Robert Hamilton asks, reason not to vaccinate. Diagnostic PCR testing sensitivity levels are oversensitive and may drastically overstate infection rates.
Oversensitive and so if you're infected and it's coming back positive, how is that overstating an infection rate? So if I'm understanding the question correctly,
I think he's saying
that people have the virus and are not infected.
No,
by definition, if you have the virus, you're infected. So
yeah.
Now, where there's I would say where there's a sensitivity issue with the PCR tests is that soon after exposure, so say you had COVID, Doug, and you and I were in the same room, praying to our atheist God and breathing in the same space, I may not turn up positive for a couple of days. And the reason for that is that you need your viral titer, the number of viral particles in your body, to build up to a certain threshold before the PCR test is sensitive enough to detect those viral genomes.
Randimals ask, I have a question. A few years ago, Trump alluded to vaccines may cause autism. Is that true?
No, there is no, that's been debunked over and over again. Thank you, Randimals, for that question. There is absolutely not one shred of evidence linking vaccines to autism in any way.
Joshua Howard asks,
in fact, the physician that even put that theory out there lost his license for medical malpractice.
Oh, really?
It was a doctor in the UK, I believe.
Joshua Howard asks, is it true that if you get vaccinated, you have the mark of the beast? He didn't ask that, but he said that, and I made it into a question.
No.
Well, actually, you know what? I don't know why I'm asking you that. I got Satan in the corner. He's here with me every live stream. Hey, Satan. Oh, man. Should those with Royal Wolf 7 asks, should those with the highest risk of mortality be prioritized? That's a great question.
Yeah, so that's like this is actually a state to state debate. Say that 3 times fast. So the short answer is yes. The elderly, those with secondary conditions, the disabled should be prioritized. But even above them, the healthcare workers, the people on the front lines, are the ones that have the highest priority because if they continue to get infected, we have no one available to take care of the sick. So, and they are the ones who have the highest exposure rates to the patients. So, hospital workers, then the high-risk populations. Now, states like Florida are sort of doing it the other way around. They're going the elderly first, and then excluding young healthcare workers, which is there's a lot of political debate surrounding that. But essential healthcare workers and those at risk, such as the elderly, are being prioritized.
Yeah, I disagree with that actually, but for selfish reasons.
You just want it first? Is that what it is?
Well, I have, I think, reasonable justifications, but I think people between the ages of 35 to 65 should get it first who have children. because these are the people who their deaths would hurt the most people. Because if a person who's 85 dies from COVID, they've lived their life, their grandparents, sure, people are going to cry. Now, people are going to say I'm just a cold-hearted for saying this. But if you really think about it, if I was to die of COVID, I would impact 3 people greatly because they're reliant on my income. If my dad was to die and he's 82, we'll be sad, but nobody's going to be impacted, really. I mean,
I think it's hard to quantify those metrics.
Sorry, Dad. I hope Dad's not listening.
It's hard to quantify those metrics. I could see an argument for immunizing younger individuals since they are the most likely to spread the virus, as opposed to the older populations. We know that 20-something-year-olds are, by going out and mingling, and they tend to be more social animals than those of us who are older, are having a greater impact on the spread of the virus. But one thing we don't know yet about the vaccine is, does the vaccine actually prevent the virus from spreading, or does it just prevent you from having the symptoms of the infection? So there is a possibility, we don't know yet, that you can still get infected by the virus and the virus may still replicate, and this virus still may be transmissible to other people. But because you have the vaccine and you've mounted that immune response, you essentially become an asymptomatic carrier at that point. So that's
huge what you just said.
I want to say, this is just a theory. We don't know if this is the case. We have no information for or against that hypothesis. But as we start vaccinating more and more people, we're going to be able to read out those results to see if indeed the vaccine clears the virus from your system.
Yeah. When do you think we'd know that scientifically, reliably?
It's hard to say. I guess once we start reaching those herd immunity levels, we may be able to determine. Then we can start testing people. If we start seeing decreased numbers of the virus or infection, and then we can start going and testing people to see if they still have the virus or not, that might be a good indicator of it.
This is my question, but I read somewhere that 1/3 of all nurses and or doctors refuse to take the vaccine. Have you read stats like that?
I have heard that there is a significant number of healthcare workers that have expressed some level of vaccine skepticism. To me, as a person who's worked in this field and has seen the immense benefit that vaccines have given to society, and I know how this process works. I mean, I vaccinate mice for a living. I've actually done tests with vaccine sort of products. The skepticism, while skepticism is a healthy thing to have, and we encourage people to be skeptical about things, there has to be justified skepticism, and a lack of knowledge about something isn't necessarily a justified justified form of skepticism when there are readily available experts that are going themselves on camera and getting these vaccines. I mean, Anthony Fauci, the country's top infectious disease doctor, going and getting the vaccine in his arm on TV, it should speak volumes.
Yeah. I don't know why when you were talking about vaccines, I didn't bring this up, because I think this is beautiful. This is Penn and Teller from their show BS. And basically, if you didn't understand anything Pete said earlier, think of a vaccine as a plate glass in front of bowling pins, and the COVID as these bowling balls. And if you don't have that glass in front, all those you get infected, you'll die off. But if you have the vaccine there, the vaccine might not be 100%, and when the bowling ball is thrown, that some might get around that glass, but the vast majority, it's like between 90 and 95% for all these vaccines, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what the clinical trial data highlighted.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to the
which
question.
Is like amazing. Those are amazing numbers, especially with this RNA technology that's being used. It's really impressive.
Yeah, isn't science grand? Aren't those biochemists grand? What's your opinion, Eric Johnson asks, of the drug ivermectin?
Ivermectin. Yes. What about ivermectin? I can
Just
tell you the whole history of ivermectin.
what is it?
Ivermectin is a small molecule that is used to kill worms, and it's a treatment that is used to treat a disease called river blindness. So river blindness was actually, it's pretty fair to say was, because it's almost eradicated from the planet. Essentially, there's still a couple of cases, but essentially it's a disease of people that get bitten by these flies, and these flies inject these larvae into their skin, and essentially these larvae end up traveling to their eyes and essentially destroy their retinas. And this is what's called river blindness. And the reason it's called river blindness is because these flies live along the rivers, and these people in Africa work along these rivers for.
That's a good example. That's a great example of people always tell me, Christians always tell me that, just look at the design of the universe. That's quite the design, what you're describing there.
Yeah. So the scientist who discovered this won the Nobel Prize, I want to say like 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Essentially, he was a scientist at the pharmaceutical company Merck, who discovered this compound that was really good at killing worms. And they were actually using it, I believe, to give to dogs, because dogs get worms and other diseases like that. But they showed that it was really potent at killing these larvae in these patients that have river blindness. And not only that, all you need is one tablet a year to do this, of this drug. It's that effective. So when they found this, they're like, "Oh, this is great. This is fantastic." But there was one problem. You only have to take one tablet a year, and the people who suffer from this suffer in the poorest parts of Africa. So you're not going to make a lot of money off of this drug. So what happened is the CEO,
unless you charge like $10,000 per pill, right?
Well, what happened is, at the time, the CEO of Merck, his name was Roy Vagelos, who's sort of a mentor-ish. I've met him before. Someone who I've looked up to for a lot of my career. Actually said, we're just going to make the drug for free forever for anyone who needs it. And it was through him and the Carter Foundation, Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, essentially got this drug distributed to these villages in Africa. And this is on the verge of being one of the next diseases to be eliminated from the face of the earth because of
Merck did this?
Merck did this, yeah, and it was completely for free. And they still, to this day, they started this in the 80s, I believe, 80s or early 90s, and to this day they still make this drug available for free.
Besides the RNA, what else is in the vaccine? Is it very similar to the other vaccines? The ingredients, they put like chili pepper in there.
A little cayenne, a little Frank's Red Hot. No,
they put borscht in there for the Germans who get the COVID vaccine.
So I don't know the exact components. A lot of some of that is I don't work for the companies that make the vaccine, so I can't say for sure what's in them. But we do know that there's these RNA molecules. And these RNA molecules are encapsulated in these lipid particles. So lipids are essentially molecules that make up the membranes of your cells. So you can think of these as little fat cells, soap bubbles, essentially, that encase these RNA particles. Now, there's a good chance there is no additional adjuvants, as I mentioned, these compounds that help stimulate the immune system, because the RNA itself actually acts as an adjuvant also. So foreign genetic material can actually stimulate the immune response. So that's one way that the immune system becomes alerted to pathogens, because it sees foreign genetic material. So these RNAs would be considered foreign genetic material and could have that adjuvant property to stimulate the immune response.
For some reason, you remind me of coitus, but Proper FPV says, I will not be getting the vaccine until after it's been proven safe. Being a lab rat is not my idea of fun. Talk to Tiffany Dover. So what would you say to a person who's saying, I don't trust this, the testing that's been done already. I'm going to wait till I don't know how long. I don't want to be a lab rat.
Yeah, and I can understand why people have that sense of reticence, and I think a lot of that reticence comes from the speed at which these vaccines were developed. And I can say that the rigor, the clinical rigor that these vaccines were put through was no different than any vaccine that has been tested clinically in the past. So it has met all the same safety criteria, all the same efficacy criteria that is required to approve the use of a vaccine like this. The reason it's gone so fast is that there is an immense amount of bureaucracy within the FDA. So that has essentially been trimmed away to allow for this seamless transition of the different phases of the clinical trials, so that as soon as you got your phase 1, you seamlessly enter into phase 2. Again, with no effect or no sort of cutting of corners of the regular process that these drugs, these vaccines normally go through. So that's also said. Another reason why this has gone so fast is based off a concept of recruitment. So if I make a drug for a certain disease, in phase 1, and I think this is a good point to also highlight the different phases of clinical trials. So you have phase 1, which is essentially a safety test. So you give this drug, this vaccine to people, and you just see if it's safe at different doses to see if there are any what are called adverse events or adverse responses to this. If it passes that, it next goes on to phase 2. And in phase 2, you're now looking to see if the vaccine is effective and does what you hypothesize that it does. In this case, prevent cases of coronavirus. Once you meet a set criteria, or what are called endpoints, essentially you've met certain milestones, or the data has shown that certain milestones have been reached. You then move on to phase 3, and in phase 3 you do more of a fine tuning as to what is the appropriate dose that should be given to patients, so that you're getting the proper effect at a proper dose. You don't want to be giving them too much of the vaccine that could, hamper manufacturing costs and things like that. And you don't want to be giving them too little so that they're not producing a proper response. So it's not really a lab experiment. Oh, so the part about I want to get about recruitment. If I were to make a drug for a certain disease, I would have to recruit people who have that disease, meaning they would have to sign them up for clinical trials. There's this whole process. And that process alone can take years, just finding the right patients. Since this is so widely found in the population, recruitment is very easy. So you're able to recruit extremely quickly. You have people who are very eager to be involved in the process, so that cuts off so much time in the whole process as far as getting the drug approved.
Yeah. So proper FPV, if you're worried about just how fast it's gone, it's when, like, we put a man on the moon in just how many years, and that happened, right? Like, we did go. That happened.
It did happen. Yeah.
Bob Loblo, thank you for the donation, asks a very interesting question that I myself have wondered. I think the death rates in 2020 are about equal and maybe even lower than the total death in 2019 in the United States. So he's asking, religious broadcasters are using that, reporting that COVID death rates are exaggerated because the general death rates for 2020 are equal to previous years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that's correct. So I don't think the CDC numbers say that. And death numbers in relation to what? So I would believe that the number of traffic deaths was probably higher last year than it was this year, because more people are staying home and not driving. But if you look at the number if we look at total number of deaths, I would be very careful at the sources that that information is being obtained from.
Actually, if Bob, if you have a link, I'll approve it. If you have an official government link on the deaths from 2020 compared to 2019. Let's see here.
Yeah, and again, there are other aspects of our behavior right now that are that are causing other deaths to go down. So let's keep, we have to be aware, contextualize all this stuff.
I think we already answered this one. John VS, does people who've already had COVID need the vaccine or natural immunization enough? And
no, they are recommending that if you've had COVID, that you do get the vaccine. And again, the reason being that the vaccine will focus the immune response towards that part of the virus, which is essential for the infection to occur. Where
the vaccine is PineCreek talking to you directly, face to face, whereas getting COVID is just the general listening to
a lot of this talking.
1,000 points of light, stay the course. Only the old people know what I'm doing there. Doesn't recovering from COVID also increase herd immunity? Asked Royal Wolf.
Yeah, now there are some people who, many, and it is possible that many people will have, will have some level of immunity after they get COVID. But again, we want the best herd immunity possible, and that means by focusing the immune response to the important parts of the virus that really, for which we can have a good level of certainty that will prevent the infection.
JD Goodwin says the death rate in 2020 is much higher this year than last year. So yeah, but Bob, if you have a link, I'll look at it. Daniel Azalti, thank you for the donation. What are the best nutritional and lifestyle interventions to give your immune system a fighting chance if you haven't been able to get the vaccine yet?
Yeah.
Great question.
So we don't know what the perfect immune system looks like to combat
yeah, we do.
COVID.
You're looking at it.
Did you have it?
No. Well, not that I'm aware of, but I think you got to start with a good mustache.
Yeah, I've noticed that appeared recently.
It traps all the viruses right in here, and so it doesn't get in your body.
The immune system. So again, we don't know what type of immune system is best for combating coronavirus, and that's a very important question because we don't know why some people are asymptomatic and others are can't breathe in the hospital. But in general, this is very generalized, good immune health is correlated with good sleep, exercise, proper diet.
Yeah. Just generally being good health.
Just being in good health.
But you know what I heard, Pete? You know what helps fight COVID? Besides vitamin D, I think everybody's heard that one, right? Have you heard that one?
I've heard heard murmurings of that. Yeah.
And you know what? Even if it's false, it doesn't matter. Vitamin D is so cheap, and it's as long as you don't go crazy on it, you're not going to hurt yourself. But anyhow, I've heard that this fights COVID.
Nicotine gum.
Have you heard that? The chemical nicotine is a blocker. Maybe that's why I've been so healthy this year. Because I
would not go running to the store and buying nicotine gum because Doug says
don't. That'll raise the prices. Don't do that. Okay, but good question. I think just having general good health, getting plenty of rest, exercise, eat well, none of that Mennonite food that's all fatty, Chen asks, I read the average antibody lifespan is maybe 6 months after infection. Were any of the vaccines engineered to produce antibodies that will last longer than that by design?
Yeah, that's a great question too. The answer is we don't know how long the antibody response will last. And that is something that will be explored in the data once more and more people in the population are vaccinated. It is possible, and there are some studies with the natural infection, to suggest that the antibody protection does wane starting around 3 months, I believe, and that's another reason why people who are infected should get the vaccination. Now, there are formulations of vaccines which can help boost that immune response in a manner in which you have better memory and stuff. So that's something that we're waiting to see to find out if the vaccine does provide a longer term immunity.
Sorry about that. Next question was, why are doctors prescribing vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, blood thinners for people with symptomatic COVID? I think it's just general increasing your immune system, right?
Yeah, general sort of immune health. There are some studies to say that zinc is important in fighting viral infections in general, and deficiencies in some vitamins uh, may have an effect as just again for general immune health and the ability to generally affect viruses. But none of these things are specific to coronavirus itself.
Right.
And it's still, it's very hard to say if there is an actual true effect here too.
Excuse my ignorance, but Thanos asks ACEI. Is that a herb? Has some reductions in bronchospasm, PineCreek. Do you know what that is? ACEI?
So ACE2 is the angioprotein converting enzyme is the target, is the protein that the virus binds to in our cells. So I don't know if that's what they're talking about. Angiotensin converting enzyme is ACE2 is the name of the protein that the virus binds to on our cells to gain access. But I'm not sure
Okay.
what they're talking about.
Dingus McGulcutty asks or says, I'm currently at home sick with COVID. Sorry to hear that. I'm very healthy, 37 years old, so I'm not worried, but I've heard about long haulers. Can your guest speak to that?
Yeah, there was actually a good piece on 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago that talked about long haulers. And there are people who are reporting long-term effects, I think, muscle pains, brain fog, things like that. And it doesn't happen in everyone, and it doesn't happen, but it has been reported in some. So the only thing I can really say is that it does seem like it's something that is occurring in some people, but we just don't know who is more likely to be a long hauler and who isn't. More reason to get the vaccine.
Thank you for the donations, Silphium. Conspiracy theorist at work insists that intravenous vitamin C in high doses is the cure for COVID and all other infections. Thoughts?
It hasn't worked in the past for anything else, so I don't know why that people think that would work now.
Yeah, and I wonder what high doses means.
There was a big move to use vitamin C for cancer, and that was debunked.
Chen says, my doctor said he took it back. Randomals says, quick conversation piece. If you're at the grocery store and see people not wearing a mask or wearing their mask incorrectly, should we say something? An ethical question, I suppose.
Yeah. So wear a mask, first of all. That's very important. Keep your distance. And, if you see that someone is not properly wearing their mask and you are inclined to say something, make sure you're polite about it. Let's not harass or create any more tension than already exists out there. And let's also keep in mind that this past year has been extremely stressful for everyone. So everyone may be, not in their perfect, sense of peace, and people may be a little bit more susceptible to getting angry and stuff if you confront them in an inappropriate or abrasive way.
I think
but you can also listen to some Absolute Calm, which could help bring you back down to
go to
baseline peace.
Go to Pete's YouTube channel, Absolute Calm, if you want to help soothe your emotions about people who don't wear masks. What I say to people who don't want to wear masks is, well, first of all, I sympathize with some of them who say it's just too hot, because I live in Arizona, but now it's wintertime. But imagine you're standing face to face with someone, which happens often when, especially close talkers, and everybody has a sneeze once in a while that they just comes out of nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. So given that there's COVID out there, given that, hey, you're probably not going to die. I'm speaking to the people who don't want to wear masks. You're probably not going to die. I agree with you, especially if you're 25 years old. However, if someone's standing in front of you who maybe has COVID and has an accidental sneeze while you're talking, would you want them to wear a mask or not? Like if someone's going to sneeze in your face, you want them to wear a mask, right? And I think everybody should answer yes to that. I think even if we annihilate COVID, maybe we should all still wear masks. No, but then they can't see my mustache. Forget that idea.
The mustache could be a good trap for viral particles.
Well, you know what's interesting about masks, though? It does take away the personal, like
I do. I still work in the lab. I go into the lab every day, and it's tough because I'm a person who likes to talk to people, and I communicate with my I communicate non-verbally all the time, whether it's through smiling or with my eyes and stuff. And you lose a lot of those non-verbal cues when you're covering the mouth.
Fortunately, I have beautiful eyes, and I can communicate with them very effectively.
Yeah, a trait amongst cult leaders and psychopaths is not blinking. So I'm just going to, if we can get a
how are you doing
to
today?
See how many times Doug blinks, we can see.
But it's funny because when I go to Costco, my favorite store, I hope someday to work there, and you pass people, and some people you recognize because I go to Costco all the time. And it's like you can kind of see they're smiling because their eyes go like a little bit like that, but it's really hard to even,
Yeah. No, it definitely like messes with our, how we have evolved to communicate with each other has been completely thrown off track, right? And that just adds to the stress and the anxiety.
But it has helped for ugly people to get dates, I think.
It's kind of like I personally hate text messages and emails for that matter, because you can't gauge tone and intent most of the time when you read a text message or an email. And I think wearing the mask is very similar to that.
Oh, Thanos asked about skin color and the Pfizer clinical trials. Do we know anything about if people of different skin tones or different geographical areas might not be, the COVID vaccine might not be as effective to certain populations?
I don't know if there's anything to suggest that it might not be as effective for certain populations. I haven't seen anything that would suggest that. I think there's been more of an emphasis to make sure that different groups are represented in the vaccine trials. Just to ensure that all racial populations can say with the level of confidence that the vaccine is efficacious in all those groups. But based on the formulation of the vaccine and how they work mechanistically, I don't see anything that would suggest that there is some sort of skew in efficacy amongst certain populations.
I agree with Mennonite Myron in the chat. He says, some people also wear them in the car. I think he's implying that's kind of silly. You don't need to wear a mask if you're alone in your car.
I've seen that too. I don't wear the mask in the car if I'm alone, and if I was with some stranger, preferably I wouldn't be sitting in the car next to them. But if it's me and my fiance who live together, we're not wearing a mask. But as soon as we get out of the car, a mask is on. So.
Okay. Well, we've been going over an hour. So, any last words?
Please get vaccinated. It's really important. You're not only doing a service for yourself, but those around you in your community, your family. We need to let's put an end to this thing, please. Like, we're all tired of this already. Let's not keep it around any longer than it has.
Okay. I'm trying to. I have a soundboard here, and I'm trying to get the applause to it.
Where's the callers?
The callers? Oh, I didn't. They're applauding for you right
now. Are we going to do some SE here? I want someone to ask us questions about God.
Oh, you want to do that now?
Well, I don't know. Isn't that what happens here?
Yeah, that's what usually happens. But I don't want to. What's the word?
You don't want to taint the waters.
Yeah, this has been a pure play right now, and I don't want to mix and mingle. I think this has been really good, actually. Plus, I think I'm going out with the family to eat right now, or very soon.
Are you going out to eat?
Yeah.
Outdoors?
Yeah.
It's going to be outdoors.
Yeah.
You're sure?
Well, I have to get out of the house. Yeah.
I do this to my parents all the time. I'm like, where are you going?
Don't worry, we're wearing our masks.
So I have to FaceTime you and just make sure.
You got to remember, you know what's weird? I was going to say, hang on a second. I was going to say that remember, Pete, I live in a red state, but I don't anymore. I live in a blue state now.
That's right. That's right.
So, okay. So yeah, thanks to Pete, and you can check out him on. You want to give your Twitter out or no?
At Science, is it at Science Pete or at Science Peter? One of those two.
I'll put it in the description at Science Pete if you have further questions, and if you want to relax, if you're feeling worried, concerned, tense after watching my channel, go to his channel called
Absolute Calm.
Absolute Calm. But he might. No, he's not going to delete it now because now you're going to get a surge of subscribers. So now you got to keep it around.
I guess.
Okay. Thanks, guys. This has been PineCreek, the super spreader, talking to you. Have a great evening. We'll see you next time.